Can I?
Can I save up for it?
Can I move in?
Can I move on? Can I secure his future?
Can I keep it in the family?
Can I bank here?
Or even here?
Can I keep my money safe?
Can I get a little extra?
Can I ask her?
Can I manage one?
What about two?
Can I go back to school? With Absa, I can.
I can.
I can.
I can.
I can.
I can. I can.
We do more so you can. That's Africanacity.
A very good South African morning to all the nominees, our guest speakers, Absa executives, esteemed colleagues, and dear friends from the Jewish community. My name is Cliff Mayinga, and I will be your virtual MC this morning for the Absa Jewish Breakfast Achievers Awards. It is always an honor and a privilege for me to be part of this auspicious event every year, and this year it is no different, albeit me looking different to previous years, and it is just the beard. Welcome to our 21st Absa Jewish Achiever Breakfast, which we are hosting for the very first time virtually. I am sure you will all agree with me in saying this has indeed been a challenging year, and the year is not yet over. Having said that though, and being the resilient nation that we are, it is only befitting that this year's theme of the Absa Jewish Achiever Breakfast is none other than heroes. All our nominees and winners to be announced on Sunday are indeed heroes. We recognize you and we thank you for all that you continuously do for your families and for the greater nation. We have a great lineup of speakers for you this morning, namely Mr. Oscar Siziba, who is the Managing Executive at Absa, Howard Sexton, who is the Chairman of the South African Jewish Report. We've got Jeff Gable, who is the Chief Economist at Absa, and I'm hoping that this time around, he will have slightly better news compared to last year, albeit I highly doubt. Last but not least, our guest speaker for today, Dr. Prof. Nick Benadal, who will give us a message of hope to take with us into the future. Our event will take an hour this morning, so I invite you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy this morning with us. Without any further ado, I here invite our first speaker and Chairman of the South African Jewish Report, Mr. Howard Sexton.
As Chairman of the South African Jewish Report, I welcome you to the Absa Jewish Achiever Awards Breakfast 2020 and to the most prestigious virtual audience around the world. This morning, we're joined by nominees and winners around the globe as we celebrate the extraordinary and the unique. For 21 years, we have rejoiced in how we as a community have helped build this nation in all aspects of the unique matzah pudding that is our country. For 17 years, our partners in Absa have banked our community, cared for our businesses, and partnered with us to celebrate all that we can achieve as a nation. So to our friends at Absa, to Oscar and Cliff and Bongewe, a huge thank you for everything you do for us, for our community, and for all of South Africa. If we paint these awards by numbers, this year, we had 596 people nominating 291 individuals and organizations for 9 awards. 12,089 people voted for our winners, and the final say was had by 4 panels of 24 judges and our auditor, Garen Chaitovitz of BDO. What we have for you this weekend is simply breathtaking. We have interviewed more than 150 people, and on Sunday, it will be evidence the magnitude of what we have gone through and our determination to continue to celebrate the heroes amongst us. This year, there was no doubt what we had to celebrate. We would celebrate how an amazing community has risen to the challenge of COVID-19, of how we have provided doctors and nurses and psychologists and professors and teachers and humanitarians who have been at the coalface of the fight against this pandemic, feeding the needy, providing textbooks and education, distributing blankets and masks and sanitizers and food parcels to millions of South Africans. These are the true heroes of COVID. I want to single out this morning one person, Glyn Wallman, because she represents everything that is good in our community. She and her team at the Angel Network have in no time built a network of organizations and people, thousands of people dedicated to improving the very texture of our nation. But there are so many others. How Hatsola has cared for those amongst us with COVID. How the people who run our old age facilities around the country have kept so many of our elderly safe. They and so many others we recognize and acknowledge this weekend, for they are the true heroes of COVID. The Geshe Fund, the Rambam Trust, Orjet, people and organizations who have kept businesses afloat and have retrained people who were laid off during the pandemic. But ladies and gentlemen, what have we actually learned from a year in isolation, locked in our homes, devoid of normality and separated from our friends, our families, our loved ones, and our community? I think we've learned 2 things. Firstly, We've learnt the resilience of human nature, of the human spirit, and how quickly we can adjust to a new abnormality. And secondly, we learned that our health, our lives, our safety depends on the actions and behavior of all of those people around us. 2020 has really reinforced the notion of community, our interdependence between ourselves, our reliance upon each other. We may be physically separated apart, but we have never felt greater reliance and the need for each other. 2020 was a test that we survived. 2021 will be the test to see if all the good we discovered over the past year was meaningful and lasting, or whether we return unchanged to the world we left behind in February. These are indeed trying times, but we will be judged by how we tried. And so finally, to our Absa family, Cliff, thank you. You have walked a journey with us for the past 17 years. Next year will be 18 years. And in numerology in Hebrew, 18 stands for Chai, life. And so let us start this breakfast with a toast. A toast to life, a toast to our winners, a toast to all of our nominees, a toast, l'chaim, l'chaim, to life, and to a better year ahead of us in 2021. L'chaim.
L'chaim. Wow, Howard, thank you for that wonderful address. You always have a strong message for us to take with us into the future. Thank you very much for that. And we as Absa are looking forward to the 18th year. Our next speaker is Mr. Oscar Siziba, who is the Managing Executive at Absa. Oscar, a very good South African morning to you, and over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cliff, for that warm welcome. Good morning to all our nominees, our guest speakers, Absa executives, and our esteemed colleagues. This has been a challenging year for all of us with the COVID-19 pandemic putting personal, business, and economic well-being at risk. We all had to adjust to the new normal and new ways of doing things. These unprecedented times, we had all to adjust to the new ways of doing things, our new normal. Whether we were ready or not, we had to quickly adapt to the digital ways of doing things, endless Zoom, MST Teams, and in some cases, even the WhatsApps. We had to get accustomed to the 2020 ways of speaking. Can you please mute your screen? Can you please stop your screen sharing so that I can share mine? Can you mute your button? Please don't forget to unmute your button. Thank you so much. These are some of the things that we had to do that we were not accustomed to. This event in case in point in time, we are used to have it physical, face-to-face and engagement and networking event. We had to think outside the box to bring it to you in this manner that we have done today, very unconventional. This year it is our 21st year partnership with the Jewish Report. What a milestone. It is so befitting that the theme about today or about this year's event is about celebrating our heroes. As a proud sponsor of the Jewish Achiever Awards, as Absa, we are excited and honored that despite the COVID-19 and the effects it has had on our economy, we have been able to bring it to you and celebrate it in the manner that you'll be proud of. We are so excited that the way our Jewish community has come out in numbers to support communities in South Africa, to support businesses in our country, and more importantly, to make sure that we are all ready to fight this pandemic. And for that, our entrepreneurs that have been with us, has been an amazing, amazing journey. We have seen it in the past 7 months that how difficult it has been for many businesses, especially the SME businesses. This is an opportunity today and going forward to get our entrepreneurs to think differently and practically on how to do things differently and leverage on their strength and their capabilities and their innovative thinking to make a difference in our country. The role of entrepreneurs, it's going to be more important than it has ever been, because through the entrepreneurs, we're not only going to win the issue around our health situation, we're going to also win the economic battle, which is the two wars that we're fighting. We want to survive on the health side, we also want to survive on the economic side, and in between all our chiefs and our army commanders is our entrepreneurs and the businesses. As Absa, we understand the critical role that we play and also that the entrepreneurs play. As a bank, we are committed to continue supporting our entrepreneurs. We have worked so hard during this period in making sure that our entrepreneurs get through this period through our payment relief programs, creating platforms for them to connect with one another. But more important, the issue around information has been critically important. Our webinars have been in the center of everything else, connecting the sector experts, connecting the professional experts, but more importantly, giving our business people and our entrepreneurs the opportunity to connect not only with their customers, but more importantly with their communities. This relationship is extremely important for us. We're going to continue to travel this journey with the Jewish community. We're going to continue to support the entrepreneurs and the nominees that have joined us this morning, because with these nominees, with the caliber of business people we hear, we can and we will win this war against the pandemic. And more importantly, as Absa, we continue to think differently on how we can do more for you so that you can do more for yourself, for your employees, for your communities, and ultimately as a country, we can start seeing growth and deal with the issue of poverty and unemployment in our country, because it is through that. Not only the entrepreneurs give us the opportunity and the weapons to deal with the impact of the economy on our pandemic, but they also help us to deal with the systemic issues that we've been helping. It is now that all our entrepreneurs and our business people have to come together. As we have seen that when we collectively come together, we achieve more. When we collectively work together, we find solutions and problems that we face. And our relationship with the Jewish report has been around that. And in the 21 years that I have seen it grow from strength to strength, and every single year we see the impact we're making in our communities. Colleagues, and to our nominees, this is the moment that really we need to continue on this journey. And us as Absa, we are completely obsessed in acknowledging the strength of our people, our bankers who have joined us this morning, to continue to think about how best they can service you and assist you in your journey. And I know for a fact that with the bankers we have, with the customers we have, our relationship that we have with the Jewish community, we can conquer not only the COVID impact, but create a sustainable economy, a sustainable community, and ultimately all of us become winners. Ladies and gentlemen, have an awesome morning and enjoy the engagement. We have our bankers here to assist you, and from my side, have a lovely morning.
Can I ask her?
Can I get a little extra?
I can.
I can. I can.
Use your Absa Visa card and earn up to 30% real cash back with Absa Rewards. And you can easily and safely manage your card on the Absa banking app. We do more so you can. That's Africanacity.
Thank you for sharing the 17-year journey out of 21 that Absa and the Jewish Report have had. It is a testament to what we as a collective can achieve. Not only have you demonstrated what it is that we as an organization have been able to do, but what it is that we are capable of going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Jeff Gable, who's our Chief Economist at Absa. I hope that you've got slightly better news than what you had the last time. But let me not preempt that. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Jeff Gable. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this very unorthodox circumstance. You'll recognize me from previous years. My name is Jeff Gable. I'm chief economist for Absa. You might remember me as the person who had not great news at the time of last year's Achievers Awards. You will remember me from last year. The year before, it hadn't been great news, and the year before that, it hadn't been great news. It's been a bad run for sort of economic outlooks globally in many places, but certainly in South Africa, and that was before we had the challenge of COVID. So today's talk is going to be a little bit challenging in places, but the view is that sort of forewarned is forearmed. So I'm going to share sort of three broad sets of thoughts with you today. One, just a quick update on where we are kind of with regard COVID itself. The second one is around where we are with regard South Africa's economic recovery from the first lockdown, but also share some a little bit worrying thoughts about what the next year or two or three might bring for us. And then I want to end with some concluding thoughts. So it's going to be sort of short and sharp. Maybe in 2021, it'll also be upbeat. So in terms of just powering into the presentation here and thinking about where we are, it was barely a year ago that the first confirmed case of what we first called Wuhan flu and then became COVID-19 was confirmed. So this has all happened at immense speed and in a super dense way. But as much as we know vastly more about COVID and global pandemics and sort of the issues broadly, it's still worth reflecting on just how far we've come in how short a span of time and how much still is not known. So, for example, we're still learning how far, how fast, how disruptive COVID is going to be to societies, to economies, to global health systems. We're still learning how deadly it's going to be. And as a particular focus for this presentation, we're going to be still learning about how and when you shut down economies and how you're best able to reopen them. So there's a huge amount of learning by doing that's still taking place today. Now, the worrying bit, and I'm sure you've seen these slides, is what's going on in Europe currently, what's going on in the US. So if we thought that the first wave of COVID back in sort of February, March, April, early parts of May was scary enough. Remember those scenes, particularly from New York City, of hospitals that were overrun with container trucks being used to sort of store people who'd passed away. Well, the horrific news that we're faced with right now is in the US, we've now reached a point where there's more than 200,000 new confirmed cases a day. Compared to that early year peak, this is almost 5 times the case count. In countries like the UK, also wave 2 seems to be 4 or 5 times more severe than the first wave. And even in those countries that have been singled out first wave around as having done the right things at the right time, contact tracing and others, in places like Germany, where 4 or 5 times the incidence now than was the case much earlier this year. So the second wave is real and it's very, very scary. Here in South Africa, it's something that so far, right, we've managed to navigate. We know back in late June into July into early August, we were really seeing sort of a very strained health system in South Africa, real worry. And at that point, we had sort of 12,000 to 14,000 new cases a day. September, October, even early November, in some ways, COVID is sort of, the health aspects of this has moved out of our frontline consciousness because new confirmed cases are sort of stable, 1,000 or 2,000 a day. Very, very significant numbers if that's a colleague, a family member, or a friend, but certainly much less than the peak that we had, and to be fair, much less than the peak that we'd feared. But even here in South Africa, we're starting to see in the daily numbers this slow and worrying rise. So what are our takeaways and what are our considerations around COVID in South Africa? Well, first of all, the first wave, frankly, we probably got through a little bit better than certainly we had feared. What we see elsewhere in the world is a second wave is almost inevitable. Our timing won't be the same as Northern Hemisphere countries, but the experts in South Africa are suggesting that we need to be very mindful now, keeping on top of our social distancing, not losing the plot as we go into the end-year holidays, but be preparing for March, April, May of next year for our sort of dense second wave. There's been fabulous news over the last 2-3 weeks around global vaccines, right? But even at that, with that point, we need to be very mindful. There's still a lot of testing that needs to be done. There's production on a scale that is unheard of that needs to happen. We're learning much more about logistics, not just getting stuff places, but cold supply chains and others, and sourcing. So there's huge challenges. And so whilst some parts of the world will see some parts of their population start to receive effective vaccinations by the end of this year, for most of the world, this looks like we're going to be well into 2021. And of course, until we start to vaccinate very widely, the chance that we're able to return to a normal that we would have recognized as normal in 2019 is very much something for the future. And it's worth mentioning here that South Africa is one of very many countries that hasn't made advanced purchases of vaccines. So as much as the global news around vaccine looks very promising, this is not something that changes our behavior for this end-year holiday season. It's not something that changes things in a super positive way in the immediate future. In terms of our economics, well, one thing we're trying to track is just how steep was the decline, of course, late March, April, when we were in what we later called lockdown level 5, but also where is normality returning to the economy? I'm sure all of us that speak to people in our own sectors or entrepreneurs or big or medium businesses will know that there's some businesses that are doing tremendously well in this environment and many others that are really struggling. Google has some fascinating data that looks around mobility. It's tracking if you have a mobile phone or a tablet. It's sort of tracking where you are during the day, and it can kind of figure out where you live because you tend to be there 7 days a week at night. It can tend to work out where you work. It knows where transit hubs are. It knows where shopping centers are, others. What we see from the data that's in front of you right now, the orangey line, the top line there is grocery and pharmacies. And so in that space, what we're seeing is that it's kind of back to normal. Zero in this graph was sort of footfall in sort of pharmacies and grocery retailers back in January and February. And you can see where you've got sort of the monthly pattern. End of the month, we get paid. We go and buy a bunch of stuff. By the middle of the month, it's a little bit thinner in many households. But other parts of the economic recovery look much more lagged. None more so than the bottom line here, which is transit. So that's monitoring traffic on major thoroughfares. It's thinking about airports, of course, but it's thinking about passenger trains and others. And there we're still about 30% down from where we are before. So just because your local eatery may have more people in it than was the case before, it doesn't mean that COVID is behind us, and it certainly doesn't mean that some of the more positive economic numbers that we're seeing right now means that the economic strain is behind us. When we think about it as Absa research, and we think not about any individual month or any individual quarter, but we think around sort of various sectors from the economy. Well, we've listed this in sort of a broad area. The worst impacted parts of the economy I've listed here as greater than 20% contractions this year. But of course, you'll know if you're involved in catering or accommodation or anything related to hospitality or holding events, greater than 20%, I think you'd take a minus 20% right now for 2020. The numbers are dramatically weaker than that. The construction sector, we know that residential construction, people making additions to their homes, is looking a little bit firm, but outside of that, very, very weak activity. And even the motor trade, we think will be down almost 30% this year. The only sectors that we see in South Africa that in 2020 actually are likely to have grown is agriculture. And frankly, agriculture is much more about the growing season. It's rains coming in the right place at the right time, little to do with the rest of the economy. And of course, telecoms. The way we're reaching out to you today is very different from the way we've reached out to you in every year before with the Jewish Achievers Awards. And so those parts of the economy are doing well. But the broadest point I want to make here, and I think it's a really important one, is just how different this downturn is likely to be from previous downturns that we've seen. So in the graphic in front of you right now, sort of the orangey yellow line is what we as a research team had predicted for the South African economy going through 2020 and 21 when we sat down at the beginning of this year. And so again, you'll remember that the talk I gave towards the end of last year was not terribly upbeat, and that's reflected in this line. We thought that by the end of 2022, the economy would be 3 or 4% larger than it had been before. That's really grinding growth, right? That's not a business opportunity that leaps out to you. The red line is what we think actually happened. So you have this enormous sharp drop as the country entered into a very significant lockdown, and then we started to see some recovery In growth rates, what are you going to see? Well, when the third quarter data come out, when the fourth quarter data for 2020 come out in South Africa, the growth rates are going to look larger than we've ever seen before. But that's a growth rate off a much smaller initial opportunity. And so our best guess is that it's not going to be the end of 2021 that South Africa just gets back to where we were at the end of 2019. It's not going to be the end of 2022 or 2023. It's going to be late 2024 or 2025, half a decade lost just to get the South African economy back to the size it was at the end of last year. Remember, last year was really tough. Now that has important implications, right? It has implications for how people are managing their businesses and thinking about sort of organic growth going forward. It has huge implications for us as a country when we think about employment. Sure, an awful lot of jobs were lost during lockdown itself and some are returning. But for many businesses that are now going to be smaller than they were before the lockdown, not just for 1 or 2 quarters, but for many periods ahead, I'm afraid the overall story around employment is going to be really worrying for some time. And then, of course, I want to make the comparison with the last economic downturn that we saw here in South Africa. So remember the huge boom of sort of the mid-2000s, 2004, 5, 6, 7. That's the time I moved to South Africa, and this place was really, really flying. Then we got hit, 2008-9, with the first recession South Africa had faced in the better part of at that point, 15 or 20 years. That recession lasted 5 quarters. And by that I mean the economy reached a certain point, we shrunk, we started to grow again. It took 5 quarters, barely more than a year, to get back at least to where we were before in terms of the overall size of the economic pie. This time around, we think it's going to take 4 or more likely 5 years. So that economic pain is going to be with us. And remember the previous slide, when we're thinking about lockdowns and we're thinking about the uncertainties, all the unknowns that we still have around the health aspects of COVID, the societal impacts, and the economic impacts as well. So in this space, right, I've never been more wishful that myself and my research team are wrong, and that in fact the world turns out much better than we expect. But there's very little evidence of that right now, so scenario planning is going to be absolutely critical. Being hopeful for a better future, but also managing one's business and one's opportunities in case things go in a way that's a little bit more challenging than we had hoped for. I want to finish off here with my short time with you with just a couple broad thoughts that I think are going to take us through the next quarters and over the next year or two. And part of that is reflecting that scenario planning I mentioned on the last slide. We are in a highly uncertain and volatile environment. We need to have vaccines that are tested and proven. We need to produce them not in tens of millions or hundreds of millions of doses. They need to be produced in billions upon billions of doses and distributed not just to the rich world and not just to those that are most vulnerable, but to a global population. Until that takes place, we're very much in an environment where stop-start in different parts of economic activity are likely. We're very much in a period where uncertainty is very, very high. We know that the focus on the near-term recovery, sold very few cars in April, sold more cars in May. The growth rate between April and May looks enormously large, but in levels, remember, we think it's going to take many years to get back to the levels that we were before. And it's going to be that level focus rather than growth rates that are going to be really important as we understand the next steps in the economy. In South Africa, household incomes are going to come under incredible pressure. Job losses in many sectors have been very substantial already, but in an environment where it takes many years for the economy to get back to where it was before, I'm afraid there's going to be more jobs destroyed than created in the quarters and years ahead. And of course, some of the critical support programs, using the UIF in order to prevent firms from having to let go workers during the lockdown, being able to bolster social grants in order to protect South Africa's most vulnerable. The money available to do that going forward is getting slimmer and slimmer. More broadly, government action is absolutely important in this space. And we've heard over the last week or so about the investment forums. We know about the reconstruction plans, but in a really critical and transparent way, the message from National Treasury, the message from Cabinet more broadly, public finances here are approaching a crisis. There simply isn't the amounts of money necessary to protect the South African economy in the same way that European countries are able to do so, the US, Canada, and others, which means that the economic recovery here is going to be very much focused on the private sector. And how do you get the private sector going? You get the private sector going through confidence. And whether we look at business confidence or household confidence, whether we look across sectors, all of these confidence levels right now, that recovered from the worst of the lockdown, are still at multi-decade lows. And so there's a real uphill challenge. And the last of the points that I want to make with my time with you here this morning is just around leverage. And on that side, when I'm thinking about leverage, I'm thinking about it in the simplest ways. The messaging from National Treasury is that public debt has risen so quickly and so far, there simply isn't more money to throw at South Africa's various challenges. In this period where businesses are impacted by less demand, you can imagine that the business sector is also likely to end up with more debt in the periods ahead than it had planned for, and households as well, right? As incomes are under pressure, we need to continue to do the best for our families. And so in this space where households, where businesses, where governments have more leverage, well, it helps us today, but of course going forward, what's the flip side of leverage is that your incomes tomorrow are going to need to service the debt that you've taken on today. And so it just puts an extra headwind on any recovery that we expect in the periods ahead. So I hope that that was informative. I know that it wasn't upbeat. At the same time, I know I'm speaking to the exact sort of audience that can help lead South Africa through this very difficult period and into a brighter future. Thank you very much.
Can I bank here?
Or even here.
Can I keep my money safe?
With Absa, I can.
I can.
I can.
You can bank conveniently and safely on the Absa banking app. Download the Absa banking app today. We do more so you can. That's Africanacity.
Thank you, Jeff, for what some might say a very sobering economic overview. So thank you for delivering what is definitely a complex matter with such clarity. The road ahead is definitely long. But indeed, we have been pre-warned, and therefore we are pre-armed and ready to tackle the challenges that are going to face us for the next 5 to 6 years. It's going to be a very long yet painful one, but I am assured that if we work as a collective, we will definitely see the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, as we wind down to what has been a great morning, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Prof. Nick Benedal, who is going to deliver a message of hope and inspiration as we move into the future. Prof, thank you ever so much for having taken the time to join us this morning. And as always, we're looking forward to what it is that you have to share with us this morning. Good South African morning to you, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be with you again on this special occasion where you're celebrating your achievements, and I'm delighted to join you in that celebration. And let me start by congratulating you on the hard work you've inevitably done to get through this turbulent and challenging year. You know, I've learnt over the years that every year has its own story and its own rhythm. And this year, for sure, has had a particular message for all of us. And as all of us have struggled to figure out what it feels like and how to engage with it and how to do well and keep those engines running, it just reminds me that this is what life's about. Life presents these unexpected challenges. And yes, much of life is a continuation of a long story, but occasionally there are off-ramps or deviations, and we suddenly find ourselves in very different territory. Throughout the years, I've been working with individuals and companies grappling with what COVID means and what's happening in our economy and our society and indeed the world. I'm constantly struck that there's no simple formula. that no two companies are the same, no two industries are the same, and no two entrepreneurs or business leaders are the same. All of us have to figure out how we are going to make a difference, how we're going to fit our work into this incredibly fast-changing, complex and competitive world that we're in. I've been around a long time, so I've witnessed things that I never would have expected. When I was your age, China was a total non-feature, and nobody I knew predicted it would rise to become the superpower it is and may well become even more of. Russia and the Cold War was embedded in our thinking, in our daily lives, and the US was a giant superpower that was in some soft ways an imperial power. None of us predicted the kind of digital revolution that we've gone through in the last 20 years and are still going through. So the truth of life and strategy and running a business is that we've got to do the best with what we understand a situation to be, but to make sure that we're putting enough time and energy into stepping a little above the business or even outside the business to make sure that the direction we are traveling in is the right one. Now, of course, knowing what that is something you do all day. But very often what I find is that we are so focused on getting the job done that we sometimes lose perspective on the next, the longer run, where this thing is going. And of course, this has been one of those years where, for sure, for most of you, you've had to dig into operations, shift your cost structure, shift the structure, shift how you work remotely and deal with markets and customers that are all going through this tricky period. Of course, the irony is in periods of massive change like this, whole new opportunities open up. And unless you're keeping your eyes on the bigger prize, you may miss them because you keep doing what you've always done and try and do it better. I often think of the analogy of keys and locks. When I was a youngster, we all had Yale locks and a key. And if you think of a key as a device to open up and unlock a market, we know how it works. We have a key, it has to be the right key. In other words, the key that you put into the lock must fit the lock or the market. And so we turned it and opened the gate or the door, whatever it was. I remember as a youngster, along came combination locks. These were mechanical combination locks where there was no key anymore, and you had to turn left and right in the sequence, and you had to memorize or know the combination. And it opened, just like the Yale lock did. And then along came more technical developments. Along came electromechanical pads with a chip inside where you punched in the same sequence, but you didn't have to move anything digitally, and a chip sent an instruction to a mechanical device that released the lock. All doing the same thing, all with the same function, but in a very different form. Later, I saw thumbprints being used, fingerprints, because those are apparently unique, and so the system stored your fingerprint. You put your fingerprint on the device and the door opened. The market unlocked. And recently, a year or so ago, I flew to Dubai where my retina was examined with a device that then kept a record of my unique apparent retina. The point I'm making is that all of us, as we go through these kinds of years, have to change the how and the what we're doing to make sure that we're fitting the needs of a changing environment. All of us go to restaurants. All of us have watched how restaurants have had to change their mode, their method, their cost structure in an agile way to cope with new needs. And much of this we still haven't figured out. Will we ever go back to the office in the way we did before? And how much more productive have we been because we haven't had to drive through traffic, and yet how stressful Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting has become. So these are evolutionary dynamics that change the way we live. And of course, the ultimate question is, does your lock, do you understand your lock, and does your key fit the lock? Can you open up new markets, whether they're digital or any other product or service you provide? That's really the heart of good strategy. South Africa has, over many decades, built some remarkable companies. And these companies, some of them have been successful offshore, some haven't. But in our environment, South Africans have a resilience to them, a sort of can-do mentality. We complain a lot. We spend a lot of time blaming them, whoever them is. But in fact, at the bottom line of it, we managed to reconstruct ourselves, our businesses, our relationships, our products and services, and we keep delivering value. And that's why this event is so important. Is because from my perspective, I want to challenge you, but also congratulate you for the work you're doing. Because this economy, this society, in fact, this country, is going to largely depend on the innovation and the drive and the commitment of people like yourselves. Many people like yourselves in all sorts of communities. But we need this spirit of entrepreneurship to make sure we have a sustainable, competitive, and changing economy. And of course, as you all know, we're in a bit of trouble. I want to share just 4 lenses with you that may help you think about, as you take a break and think about the year and reflect on what you learned this year, what you unlearned this year, and what your plan is for next year. So let me share these 4 frames for you to think about. They're broad, but they may help you think systemically about what to do next. The first is very simple. How's the environment around you going to continue to change? What's going on around you? And that's a very, very critical factor that so many companies lose track of. I see so often a business has been built, it builds a model, it builds a culture, it builds a system, and then its environment changes and it really fails to change because it stops reading the environment, the market, the customers, the non-customers with the same passion and insight. Because what happens is we build a business, we become more internal to run the business. So what is going on around you? And how much time are you spending building new networks of insight, new relationships, stepping outside the business to look at it truly, I mean passionately, from the customer's point of view? That's our environment. And it applies at 3 levels. Your own market, the broader industry you're in, and then this bigger picture of South Africa and its economy and its politics and its society. So box 1, are you in touch with the environment? When I was a young executive driving up the N1 to the inner city every week or so, I would drive the same route to work every day. And I didn't concentrate on what I was doing because I did it so repetitively. And that's where habit kills a business, because you keep on doing what you've always done. And I always used to make the joke that sometimes I woke up when I got to work. You don't want to do that. You're living in the fastest change in human history. Some of it negative, a lot of it positive, and very complex and holistic. So the first box is, how's the environment around you changing? The second is strategy, is what are you going to do next? That's what strategy is. Strategy is about developing an idea in action, not just an idea in concept, that you're going to do next that will be different than what you've done in the past. It's how you will compete. What will your business do that the market wants or will want it to do that your rivals can't do? And if you can answer that coherently on a piece of paper, then maybe you have a strategy. The problem we all have is the fight between memory and vision. So how we've got in the room and what we're doing in the room is very often not how we're going to get out of the room. The third box is about how you organize the business. Every startup I've worked with in the early days goes through many periods of reorganizing. This is absolutely appropriate because a system and a structure will eventually drive the strategy, the operations. And you've got to make sure you've designed the way decisions are made and who gets to do what in a particular way to suit the changing world around you. So that's the organizational box. And you know, most of us, when we're starting a business, are so focused on the product or service that we sometimes lose track of the engine we're trying to build. And I look at great South African companies and I see in the engine room, they've designed the engine room of decision making, how we get things done, who's going to do what, very, very carefully, and constantly renewing that. The fourth box is who's going to do this. And by that, really what we mean is the leadership. And most of you are in smaller companies and you've got a small team of people. and you really drive those relationships for outcomes and results, and you set goals and you go for them, and you're tough on performance, and you're always searching for excellence. But you've got to keep looking at the team and asking yourself, have we got the right combination? Are they committed? Are they really in the game? Have they got the energy to really keep giving? Are they leading the people they need to lead to make things happen? So I wanted to share those 4 boxes with you. What's going on around us? What are we going to do next? How are we going to organize it? And who is going to do this in addition to your own personal leadership? It's been a tumultuous year. I've had to unlearn, I've had to dump, I've had to relearn, I've had to think. In some ways, it's been one of the most fantastic years because the rhythm of the normal has been disrupted. And I love that. South Africans generally, although we, as I say, complain a lot, we cope with this kind of change. When I go to Aussie or to the UK or to the US, I often find people don't have this resilience built into the way they live and think. This is an exciting, sometimes dangerous, unpredictable country. And that's where you are. You are, as I've said for years, in a frontier, a system that's opening up to possibilities, full of threats, but also fantastic opportunities that will lie ahead for us. So I've been watching so many talks digitally in the last 6 months of people who've got this message right. And I'm sure you've all watched excerpts of Chasing the Sun, where Rassie briefed the team. And I love that talk because it's a rallying cry. It's a call to action. And what he did in that talk and that series when winning the World Cup is give them a deeper purpose. Leaders like yourselves have got to do that. You've got to have thought through the core values that drive your business. Because unless people have the energy and commitment to drive the business, we're going to not keep the system full of creativity, full of energy. Unless you're able to open up the conversation with customers, non-customers, suppliers and employees, you might miss some of the dynamism that this environment is wanting you to offer. And that's why I like those clips. They are extraordinary. It's extraordinary that we achieved what we did in Tokyo. And so I want to end by saying to you, as you step back, think about 2 things, a map and a mirror. The map is laying out what you're going to do next. Write it down. I can't encourage you enough. I don't mean in PowerPoints, and I don't necessarily even mean bullet points, but take a sheet of paper and lay out the journey for next year and maybe the year after that. Make some assumptions. Test those assumptions, but put together the package of choices that you believe are inherent to what you will do differently and next that will build advantage to your business. Make a map. All leaders need a map. It's how we get from where we are to where we want to go. The other aspect is the mirror, and that's a much more intimate and personal thing. Have a look in the mirror and ask yourself, why are you doing this? And why should others want to do this? Because what I've learned about running any business is the top job is very stressful. Constant demands of your time, things go wrong, you're always under pressure. You have to have the self-belief of looking in the mirror and being able to answer for yourself that you want to be in this battle, you want to be in this room, and why. And that core belief is the culture of the business, because that has to be reflected in everybody who touches your business. The thing I love about business and have all my life is we touch and change people's lives. That's ultimately our mission. Yes, we keep score financially, but the real goal of business is to add value to people's lives in a way that gives them a better life, more opportunities, and there's our partnership with all our customers. So congratulations once again, and I hope you have a good last few weeks, and that you really take some time over the break to think deeply, not just about the how, but also the why and the what of what you'll do next. I wish you well.
Prof, thank you for always being so inspirational. Indeed, The rhythm of the normal has been disrupted. But what I take away with me, and I hope you sitting at home definitely take away with you too. 1, the map. 2, the mirror. Thank you, Prof. We really do appreciate your time and your message of hope. On a very sad note, ladies and gentlemen, as they say, all good things must come to an end. We've sadly come to the end of what has been a great morning. Howard, to yourself and the entire South African Jewish Report, thank you so much for a great partnership that has lasted 17 years and will continue for the foreseeable future. To the Absa team, thank you very much for your consistency in support of this great occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take time to once again congratulate all the nominees. You've done amazing, amazing work. Thank you for having led from the forefront. And we look forward to Sunday, where the winners will be announced. But I am sure you will all agree with me that each and every one of you are indeed winners. And thank you and congratulations once again. And to that, as we end this morning, I say, L'chaim, L'chaim, L'chaim. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have an awesome weekend and look forward to seeing you once again. Thank you.